A scream tore through the Texas frontier. It was a sound that marked the end of a world. Ellie Harper, just 25 years old, was ripped from her home in 1862 and thrown into the heart of a Comanche village, a captive. Surrounded by suspicion and danger, a single act of bravery would tie her fate to two young girls and force her to challenge everything she'd ever known about loyalty, family, and home. Would she become a bridge between two warring worlds, or would she be crushed in their collision? Dust choked the air. Hooves thundered across the Texas plains, a relentless drumbeat of doom. Ellie Harper clung to the splintered porch rail of her family's homestead, her knuckles white, her hazel eyes wide with a dread that stole the air from her lungs. The year was 1862, and the frontier was a place where hope and horror were neighbors. Her father, a retired U.S. Army captain, had taught her to read the land, to see stories in the rustle of mesquite, to read warnings in the shadows on the horizon. But nothing had prepared her for this. The Comanche raiders descended like a storm cast from a clear sky. Their war cries split the dusk, sharp as shattered glass. Arrows hissed through the air. The crack of gunfire tore through the small cabin that had been her entire world. Her mother's scream was cut short. Her father's final shout was drowned by the chaos. Ellie scrambled for the rifle above the hearth, but a warrior's iron grip yanked her back. Her scalp burned as he dragged her by her long braid. Behind her, the homestead blazed, a funeral pyre consuming her past. Her parents lay still in the dirt, their blood soaking the earth they had fought so hard to tame. Bound and slung across a horse, Ellie's world tilted. Sky, ground, and smoke blurred into a waking nightmare. The raiders rode hard, the plains stretching endlessly under a blood-red sunset, carrying her deeper and deeper into the unknown. Hours bled into a darkness that offered no comfort. The band finally reached their camp, a scatter of hide tents hunkered along a sluggish, dark river. Ellie's wrists burned under the coarse rope as she was shoved to the ground. Her simple cotton dress was torn, caked with dust and the memory of violence. Faces loomed in the firelight. Hardened warriors, women with guarded eyes, children peering from the shadows. Their language was a rapid, guttural rhythm, completely alien to her ears. In that moment, she was no longer Ellie Harper, daughter of a soldier. She was a trophy, a ghost in a world that despised her. A figure emerged from the flickering glow, Chief Broken Lance. His presence was as heavy as a storm cloud, his face carved by years of sun and war, betraying no hint of mercy. At his side, two little girls, no older than 9, clung to each other like twin fawns. Nia's eyes sparkled with a bold curiosity, but Kiona's were quiet, shadowed, as if she saw the ghosts of Ellie's parents clinging to her pale skin. The chief's voice rumbled. Though Ellie couldn't understand the words, the weight of his gaze told her everything. She was a problem that needed to be solved. An older woman stepped forward, her face etched like weathered sandstone. Atta, the elder, moved with the slow, deliberate authority of one who had seen too many winters. Her dark eyes studied Ellie, not with hatred, but with a question that cut deeper. "When the river rises," she said in halting English, her voice as rough as gravel, "who keeps your life? Chains or your heart?" Ellie's throat tightened. She wanted to spit defiance, to scream for her lost home, for the life that had been stolen from her, but survival demanded silence. Her jaw set, she gave a single, stiff nod. Atta gestured to a small tent at the very edge of the camp. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of tanned hides and sage. Ellie's hands shook as she worked at the ropes, her fingers raw and clumsy. Atta tossed her a bundle of deerskin clothing. The message was clear: adapt or die. Ellie's settler dress, the last tie to her old life, was stripped away. It was replaced by the unfamiliar weight of Comanche garb. She felt like a shadow of herself, a person caught between worlds, her heart pounding with the desperate urge to run. But the plains were vast, and winter's bite was near. To escape, now, meant certain death under an unforgiving sky. Days bled into weeks. Ellie learned to survive under Ada's unyielding tutelage. She scraped hides until her hands blistered. She stitched moccasins with an awl that felt alien in her grip. She choked down meals of dried meat and bitter roots. Her back ached, her spirit felt bruised, but she bit back every complaint. Every misstep, every moment of weakness, drew Ada's sharp tongue. Yet, the elder's grudging patience was the only thing keeping Ellie alive. She began to pick up Comanche words, halting, clumsy. Each phrase was a lifeline in a sea of suspicion. The camp watched her like hawks circling prey. They were waiting for her to falter, to break. Nia and Kiona were her only reprieve. The twins lingered near her tent, their small forms darting like sparrows. Nia, bold and quick to laugh, would mimic Ellie's awkward stitching, her giggles slicing through the camp's heavy tension. Kiona, silent and watchful, seemed to weigh Ellie's every move, her gaze a confusing mix of fear and fascination. One day, Nia tossed a pebble at Ellie's feet, then fled, her giggles echoing as Kiona trailed behind her like a shadow. For the first time since the raid, the ghost of a smile touched Ellie's lips. These girls, the chief's daughters, his hope for the future, were her mirror. Innocent, yet bound by a world of violence they hadn't created. Chief Broken Lance passed her tent daily. His silence was louder than any words. His daughter's growing curiosity about the white woman clearly puzzled him, and Ellie felt the constant weight of his judgment. Was she a threat, a tool, or something else entirely? Ada's words haunted her dreams. Chains or heart, the river, the camp, the twins' fleeting glances, they all pressed against her resolve. Ellie didn't know if she could outlast the hatred, but she knew one thing with a certainty that burned in her soul. Surviving meant becoming something new, something forged in the crucible of this unforgiving land, something that was neither settler nor Comanche. The firelight danced as night fell. Ellie lay in her tent, the camp's murmurs a restless lullaby. She clutched her mother's silver locket, hidden beneath her deerskin tunic, the only piece of her past she had managed to salvage. The plains stretched beyond the tent flaps, vast and cruel, whispering of freedom and peril. Ellie's heart raced with a question she couldn't yet answer. Could she find a place among these people? Or would the frontier claim her, just as it had claimed her family? The river's distant rush held no answers, only a promise of trials yet to come. The river's murmur grew louder in Ellie's nights, a constant, restless voice. It was the camp's lifeblood, sluggish on the surface, but treacherous underneath. Ellie had avoided it, wary of the way it pulled at the banks, of the dark promise in Ada's eyes whenever the water was mentioned. That morning, the sky burned with a flat, white glare. Heat pressed down like a hand. Ellie worked where Ada ordered, scraping a deerskin stretched on a wooden frame. Her palms were raw, her muscles trembling, but she kept her rhythm. Each stroke was a stubborn act of survival. Then a child's laughter cracked the silence. Ellie glanced up. Nia and Kiona were dancing along the riverbank, their braids flying. They were too far from the other women. The river lured them on, a shimmering silver ribbon. Nia skipped ahead, bold. Kiona lingered, cautious. Ellie's stomach tightened. The river was no place for games. Then a sound cleaved the air, a shrill cry, a voice pitched with panic. Ellie's head snapped toward the river. The bank had collapsed, crumbling like brittle clay. Both girls were gone. Only churning brown water remained. She dropped the scraper. Her body moved before thought caught up. She tore across the camp, shouts rising behind her. But Ellie was closer. Her lungs burned as she reached the water's edge. For a heartbeat, she saw nothing. Then a braid surfaced. then another. The current was splitting them apart. A barrel-sized crate, a grain box from a trade, bobbed near the reeds. Ellie lunged, seized it, and shoved it into the water. The current grabbed her, but she dove anyway. Cold swallowed her whole. The river hit like a fist. She kicked hard, broke the surface, and gasped for air. Nia's face flashed ahead, eyes wide, mouth open in a silent scream. Ellie sliced through the water, caught the girl, and hauled her toward the crate. She forced Nia's body inside, the girl coughing and sputtering, clinging to the rim. "Kiona!" Ellie spun, scanning the current. A small hand broke the surface yards downstream. She lunged after it, muscles screaming. She cut across the current, teeth gritted, and reached Kiona just as the girl's head dipped beneath the foam. She grabbed her by the braid, hauled her up, and dragged her back to the crate. Nia reached out, screaming her sister's name. Ellie shoved Kiona beside her, pressing both girls into the wooden shell. Water surged, but Ellie planted her shoulder against the crate, her own body a ballast. She kicked, pushing the makeshift vessel toward the bank. Hands plunged into the water. Warriors, women, even Ada herself. They seized the crate, dragging it and the girls onto solid earth. Ellie staggered behind, collapsing to her knees. Nia clung to Kiona, both girls coughing, alive. The camp erupted. Warriors let their bows fall slack. Women covered their mouths. Then the crowd parted. Chief Broken Lance strode forward. He dropped to his knees beside his daughters, running his hands over them as if to prove they were real. The twins wrapped around him, sobbing. Only when he was sure they were safe did he lift his gaze to Ellie. She knelt in the shallows, hair plastered to her face, chest heaving. The crate bobbed beside her. For a long, searing moment, silence ruled. Then Broken Lance rose, towering. "You pulled them from the river," he said, in slow, accented English. "Twice the water tried to claim my blood. Twice you refused it." Ellie's throat burned. "They're just children. No river should take them." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The chief's jaw worked. Then he nodded once. "Chains did not save you," he said. "Heart did." He gestured sharply. A woman hurried forward with a wool blanket and draped it around Ellie's shoulders. It was a gesture of quiet recognition. Ellie sat trembling, the blanket heavy with river water and the smell of smoke. Eyes followed her, some wary, some astonished, but no longer filled with suspicion. As the sun dipped westward, painting the plains in fire, Ellie felt the river's chill sink deep into her bones. She had stepped into the water a captive. She had crawled out something else. The embers of the fire were still smoldering when dawn crept across the plains. The way the others looked at her had changed. She was no longer just the stranger. She was the woman who had pulled the chief's daughters from the river. The suspicion hadn't vanished, but it had softened. The twins clung to her more than ever. Nia would slip pebbles into her hands, giggling. Kiona would study her, trying to measure if this pale-skinned woman was as strong as the whispers claimed. One afternoon, the girls came to her tent with a braid of prairie grass twisted into a loop. "Sister," Nia announced, pressing the circle into Ellie's palm. Kiona just nodded, her eyes solemn. The word struck Ellie harder than any rope had. Sister. She had lost her family in smoke and blood, and now these two small voices were trying to stitch her into theirs. But the frontier was never gentle for long. Whispers of riders reached the camp, white men, armed and hungry for coin. Ada muttered of vultures circling before the kill. That evening, Ellie saw them at the edge of camp, men with weather-beaten hats and rifles. They smiled too easily, their eyes sharp as knives. Broken Lance confronted them, but they spoke in English, loud enough for her to hear. "Just here for business. Got whiskey to trade." Their gaze slid over Ellie, lingering. One of them whispered to another, and she heard her own name. Harper. Her blood went cold. They weren't traders. They were bounty hunters, men who knew her father's rank, and the reward her return might fetch. That night, Ellie lay awake, the twins breathing softly beside her. They had insisted on sleeping in her tent, their fingers tangled in the grass braid she wore around her wrist. She promised herself she would not let them be caught in the storm that was coming. It broke before dawn. Shots cracked like thunder. Horses screamed. Firelight exploded against the hide walls. The bounty hunters struck with ruthless speed. Warriors scrambled to defend. Women dragged children toward the river. Ellie was yanked from sleep by the twins' shrieks. She shoved them beneath a pile of blankets. "Stay still, don't move!" Rough hands tore her away. A hunter's breath reeked of whiskey. "Your uncle will pay a fortune to have you back." Ellie fought, but a rifle butt slammed into her ribs. Pain stole her breath. They dragged her through the chaos, ignoring the twins' cries. "Move, girl!" one snarled, shoving her toward the river. "Your Comanche friends won't chase far." But Ellie knew better. She had seen the fire in Broken Lance's eyes. The river glimmered under the moon. The men tried to push a raft free when a volley of arrows hissed through the night. One struck a man's shoulder, spinning him into the water. Warriors burst from the reeds. Ellie seized the moment, twisting free. A boot struck her thigh, pitching her forward. She crashed into the river, the shock of cold stealing her breath. Ropes dragged her down. She thought this would be her grave, until her hand struck something solid. The crate. The same battered box she had used to save the twins. She hooked her arms across it, kicking desperately. Her head broke the surface. Gunfire flared. Arrows answered. She clung to the crate, coughing up water. A shape cut through the fray, Ada wading waist-deep, hauling her back toward the shallows. When Ellie collapsed on the bank, the twins broke from hiding, flinging themselves against her, sobbing. "Sister," Kiona whispered fiercely, clutching her arm. The camp reeled. Broken Lance stood over Ellie, his jaw tight. "No more," he declared. "This woman is under my protection. Anyone who hunts her hunts us all." The crowd murmured, the declaration echoing louder than any war cry. Ellie, shivering, looked down at the twins pressed against her. She realized that in saving them, she had bound herself to this tribe with cords stronger than blood. Smoke still lingered over the camp when the first pale light spilled across the plains. The bounty hunters had fled, leaving behind blood and fear. Ellie sat by the embers of a fire, a coarse blanket around her shoulders. The twins were pressed close, their small hands anchoring her as if she might vanish with the dawn. But comfort never lasts long on the frontier. Before noon, word spread. Riders from the south, blue coats, U.S. cavalry pushing deeper into Comanche hunting grounds. Their banners carried the promise of discipline, but also the smell of death. Ellie's heart twisted. She knew those men, not by name but by creed. They would look at her dressed in Comanche garb, speaking their words, and they would see a traitor. Worse, they would not hesitate to turn their rifles on the girls who now leaned against her. Chief Broken Lance summoned the council. Warriors gathered, faces drawn tight. Women stood close, children clutched to their skirts. Ellie felt the weight of every stare as she stepped into the circle, not as a prisoner, but as one of them. Broken Lance rose. He spoke in Comanche. Ellie caught the words: soldiers, guns, fire, choice. Then, to her shock, he turned to her. In rough English, he said, "They come. Blue coats with wagons and rifles. They see no difference. Comanche, woman, child, even you. All enemy. You must choose. Stay or go." The words struck like an axe. Ellie's mouth went dry. The twins stared up, lips trembling. She thought of her father. She thought of the locket hidden beneath her tunic. If she left now, they might welcome her as Harper's daughter. They might call her rescued. But would they listen when she said these people had saved her life? No. They would hang the word collaborator around her neck. Ada stepped forward, her lined face unreadable. "Chains or heart?" she reminded softly. The same riddle from that first night. Ellie's voice cracked when she finally spoke. If I go with them, they will not see me as their own. If I stay, I stand with those who gave me back my life." A murmur swept through the council. Broken Lance studied her, as if weighing her soul. "Do you fear dying as one of us?" he asked. Ellie shook her head slowly. "I fear more dying with no place at all." The silence was heavy as stone. Then the chief lifted his hand. "She stays. She is under my protection." A collective breath escaped the circle. Nia and Kiona clutched Ellie tighter, their faces breaking into shy smiles. That night, the camp prepared to move north. Women packed hides, warriors checked rifles. Ellie worked beside them, not ordered but trusted. Every action felt like a vow. When the procession rode out, Ellie was placed beside Ada on a steady pony. The twins rode just ahead, glancing back to be sure she was close. An entire people, chasing safety across a land that refused to offer it. As the sun bled into the horizon, Ellie looked back only once. The river gleamed like molten silver, the same water that had tried to claim her and the girls. She understood now. Survival here wasn't about bloodlines or banners, it was about choice, and she had made hers. The northward trail carved across the plains like a scar. Dust settled on every face until they all wore the same mask of weariness. Winter came early, glazing the grasslands in a silver sea under a steel-gray sky. The Comanche settled in a sheltered valley. For Ellie, the days blurred into a new routine. Scraping frost from hides, feeding ponies, hauling water through drifts. She was no longer a captive. She was another pair of hands keeping the camp alive. Nia and Kiona followed her everywhere. She taught them to float in the icy shallows, their laughter echoing against the cliffs. "Like leaves," she told them. In return, they corrected her clumsy Comanche, patient and insistent, until even the warriors nodded at her attempts. But peace was only a pause. Scouts returned with grim faces. A fort was rising to the south, log walls and cannon wheels. The army's reach had crept closer, bringing the threat of hunger and war. That night, the council fire burned high. A storyteller named Grey Wolf, his hair white as bone, recounted old battles, treaties broken, promises turned to ash. His gaze fell on Ellie. "Sometimes the Creator places one between worlds," he said, his voice a deep roll of thunder. "Not Comanche, not white, but a bridge. Bridges are walked on, yet they also hold." The weight of his stare lingered. Days later, Chief Broken Lance called Ellie to his lodge. The twins crouched outside, eavesdropping. "The bluecoats will not stop," the chief said plainly. "They take grass, water, sky. We must send words to them before arrows fly. You know their tongue, you know their hearts. Will you speak for us?" Ellie's chest tightened. To walk into a fort flying the stars and stripes meant facing men who thought her lost, or worse, corrupted. They might chain her as a runaway. But she remembered Kiona's hand in the river, Naya's cry in the night. She remembered Ada's riddle and Grey Wolf's warning about bridges. "I will go," Ellie said, her voice steady. "If they will listen to anyone, it must be me." The journey south was cold and hard. Smoke from the fort's chimneys rose on the horizon like black fingers clawing at the sky. As they approached, Ellie felt the silver locket beneath her tunic pressing against her skin like a brand. Soldiers lined the palisade, rifles glinting. A flag of truce fluttered from a Comanche lance. Ellie rode forward. "We come to speak, not to fight." The gates creaked open. Inside, the fort smelled of pine sap and gun oil. Officers studied her with suspicion, their eyes flicking from her braided hair to her deerskin dress. The commander, a broad man with iron-gray whiskers, stepped forward. "Name yourself." "Ellie Harper," she answered, the name strange on her own tongue. "Daughter of Captain Jonathan Harper. I was a captive of the Comanche. I am no longer. I come as their voice." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The commander's jaw hardened. You expect us to treat you as a diplomat, not a deserter? Ellie lifted her chin. I expect you to treat me as someone who knows both sides. If you build your walls on every stream and plain, you will drive them to war, and war will cost you more than you can imagine. The negotiation stretched for hours. She translated Broken Lance's words, shaping them with truth, softening edges where needed. Promises were traded. Hunting grounds left untouched. The river shared. Patrols kept to marked trails. It wasn't permanent, but it was a breath, a moment of survival. When it was over, the commander pulled her aside. You could stay here, he said quietly. You have kin in Austin, a life waiting. Why return to them? Ellie looked beyond the fort walls. Broken Lance waited, the twins' eager faces peering from horseback. Because my life is already there, she said. She rode back into the dusk, the fort fading behind her. The prairie opened ahead, scarred by the weight of two nations colliding. Ellie felt the pull of both worlds in her chest, tearing and mending all at once. As the campfires glimmered in the distance, Nia and Kiona galloped to meet her, shrieking with joy. Ellie gathered them close, the grass braid still tied to her wrist, a token stronger than any treaty. She was no longer captive, nor entirely Comanche, nor wholly settler. She was something forged in fire and river, in blood and choice. Ellie Harper, a woman of two worlds, rode into the night knowing the future was uncertain. But for the first time, it was hers to shape. The stories of the frontier live on, not just in the voices that tell them, but in the hearts that carry them forward. Ellie Harper's path reminds us that choices on the edge of two worlds are never simple. Yet they shape everything that comes after. I'd love to know what you felt walking with her through fire and river, through fear and fragile hope. Let me know in the comments below. Your reflections keep these tales alive, just as campfires once kept strangers warm under the endless prairie sky. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe. Until our next journey together, ride steady, and may the stories always find you.